Evaluating tape. Titans draft picks coming up. Greg, what's up? How are you?
I was just trying to stretch out my arms. They told me I have short arms.
Did you hear him?
Of course, yeah. So I heard the end of it. Yeah.
He was not impressed.
Isn't that funny how players don't hear the negative things about them, and then suddenly draft season comes up, and here's this.
Well,
this,
they wouldn't hear that kind of stuff because those are research projects done by teams. For instance, and again, we can talk about Roger Mccreary because his tape is phenomenal. But there's only been one corner drafted prior to Roger Mccreary in the last 10 years who had arms shorter than 29 inches, and his arms are shorter than 29 inches.
Wow.
So that's the kind of stuff that teams do. It doesn't mean that Roger Mccreary isn't a good player and can't be a good player. It just means that there's a track record that teams don't do that. And the one player who was drafted did not make it. So
that's what I was going to ask. Who was it?
So teams, do that kind of stuff. And then what they say is, as good as Roger McCreary's tape is, and we can certainly talk about that in a sec because his tape's really, really good. But when teams do that stuff, they think, okay, well, that means the player's an exception. And where do you draft an exception? That's the way they think about it.
Yeah.
Second round?
Yeah, well. So you mentioned his tape. I saw some stuff on him against Alabama and Jameson Williams and Mechie, and he was outside and inside, and he was running with those dudes. Really impressive stuff.
Oh, yeah. All you have to do with Roger McCreary, I mean, not only because I think I watched 7 games, but if you just look at him against Alabama, when you said Williams and Mechie, and against LSU against Keyshawn Boutte, who's probably going to be a top 20 pick next year, you see how really well he played. He's really good at playing what we call mirror match press man, where you don't necessarily put your hands on the receiver when he comes off the line of scrimmage. That, by the way, is an example where arm length does matter, because if you try to put your hands on a receiver and you have short arms, you end up getting too close to him. And then if he is able just to kind of sneak by you, then you're in recovery mode. And that you don't want to be in recovery mode right off the line of scrimmage. But he plays mirror match press man at a really, really high level. And in those 2 games, because of the quality of those wide receivers, it really stood out.
Right. So when we were talking with him, he said, I love being on the outside, but ultimately it's just, tell me which guy to run with. So that kind of explained, from his perspective, what you just said, kind of that mirror match corner.
Yeah, and I also heard him talk about the fact that he played more zone this year. Yeah. And I made that note as well. I said what also stood out was his understanding of route concepts and combinations and zone coverage, where he played with his eyes very effectively and was almost never in the wrong position. So his tape is really, really good. My guess is he dropped to the second round because of the arm length. Yeah. And that you can debate that, Look, reasonable people can disagree about these kinds of things. And until he plays in the league, we don't know. But the one thing we do know is if you watch his tape, you see a lot of traits that you feel will transition exceptionally well to the league.
When you look at those tapes, Greg, do you see the fight? Do you see him getting through adversity? Do you see him getting burnt and then being able to bounce back? Did you see that during those games or no?
Competitiveness.
Yes.
You can see that, yeah. You can certainly see that with corners, especially corners that play a lot of press, because when you play press, you really have to be not necessarily physical, although the ones that are, you can see that immediately, but you have to get in receivers' hip pockets, and you have to play that way, and you have to be able to match their movements. That's what mirror match means. You stay, the term we use is you stay in phase and you match their movements, and you have to be able to do that. There's a lot of guys that can do that right off the ball, but then when they get to the top of the route stem and the receiver breaks, they lose contact. McCreary was not one of those guys, but there's a lot of corners who are like that.
Let's go to Treylon Burks. We've talked a lot about him with you, and it's funny, Roger McCreary, because he had a big game against Auburn, 9 receptions, 109 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Yep. And Roger McCreary said, I didn't have him much in that game, which I thought was funny. But what do you see with Treylon Burks and at 6'2", I guess, 225?
Yeah, I mean, look, I made the comparison. Obviously, I didn't know who was going to get drafted or what was going to happen.
Right.
But I said that Burks' effectiveness on slant routes for both outside and the slot made me think of A.J. Brown, but Burks is a bigger man with a bigger body. So ultimately, obviously, he was drafted to replace A.J. Brown. It's interesting. This is a discussion, and I saw an article today and I think you're going to see more of these kinds of articles because teams going forward now are going to have to make a decision on receivers. They're going to have to make a decision. Do they want to pay receivers a ton of money, or because there's always receivers in the pipeline, do you just simply keep drafting receivers? And because obviously Treylon Burks is not going to get what they would have had to pay A.J. Brown.
Right.
So John Robinson and staff made the decision that, you know what? We're not going to pay A.J. Brown, even though we know he's a great player. We're not going to pay him whatever that number was. Was it over $100 million? Was that the number?
104.2.
Yeah, they're not going to pay him that. Instead, we'll draft a guy who obviously they think is somewhat similar and can do what they want done in the offense. And we don't know the answer to that for sure because he hasn't played in the NFL, but that's the approach they took. And whereas the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, the Eagles obviously with A.J. Brown, they took the other approach that, you know what, we're going to pay the wide receiver. There's no right or wrong until we play the games.
Let's go to third round. Go ahead. Sorry. Did you want to say something, Cosell?
No, I'm waiting for you, Don.
Okay. All right. Malik Willis.
We all are.
Yes, Malik Willis. I know we actually had you break him down, I think, last week from a standpoint of what he puts on tape. So maybe this time in the direction of the developmental piece of what he is missing in his game, where it will be good for him to sit a year and kind of get used to what the NFL is. What shows on tape?
And I think that's fair. And I think that's probably the reason he fell. Keep in mind, when people say he has great traits, what do you think they mean by that? And a serious question, because I've been doing this a long time. And, what do you think people, when they say Malik Willis has great traits, what do you think they mean? And what would you say are great quarterback traits?
Being able to let the ball go, spin it the right way.
Vision.
Yeah. Speed.
Yeah.
You mean running speed?
Well, at least for him, when you talk about him as far as
being able to change the
ability,
pocket.
yeah.
Right. So basically, what people were talking about with Malik Willis is that he can throw it hard and he can run fast.
Right.
Neither one of those would be high on top of the list if you spoke to coaches as to what makes a successful NFL quarterback. And I think that's the reason he ultimately fell in the draft, because the nuances of the position. And by the way, most college quarterbacks, when they come out, have to go through this. This is not unique to Malik Willis. I think his transition is a little more extreme than many, simply because of what he was asked to do in college, which is run an offense that was not very difficult, which is not his fault. I think that's the coach. The coach decides what offense you're going to run. But the point is that he wasn't asked to do a lot of things from a detailed perspective, a nuanced perspective, a subtlety perspective that he will need to be able to do in the NFL. Now, if it all comes together for Malik Willis and these things happen over the course of time, then in addition to the ability to throw the ball really well and to have excellent athletic ability, then he could become a great player. But that will likely take some time. He's not really, I hate saying he's not really ready, because you always hear teams, and again, he wasn't a first round pick, but you always hear teams say, even with a first round pick, well, he's not going to play his rookie year. And then week 3, of course, he's playing. But, very, very, very few quarterbacks are truly ready to play as rookies.
The other third round pick, Greg Cosell, with us on 3HL, at Greg Cosell on Twitter. Nicholas Petit-Frere from Ohio State. What do you think about him?
Yeah, he looks the part really well, and he had a lot of snaps as a left tackle. He played both left tackle and right tackle at Ohio State.
Yeah.
This past year, they moved him to left tackle. The year before, he played right tackle. He had some pass protection snaps in which it just looks so perfect. Efficient, comfortable, kick slide, knee bend, balance, hand usage. But he had a very glaring tendency, and my guess is this can be coached, but a very glaring tendency to bend at the waist when he struck with his hands. And that caused major balance issues, and it showed up far too often. So you take a guy that really looks the part, has length, size, everything you want. And it's the reason he drops to the third round, because there's too many of those plays littered throughout his tape. So the question is, can that all be cleaned up so that he plays much more consistently with the proper technique?
We go from Ohio State to Michigan. Hassan Haskins, running back, physical guy.
Yeah, Haskins is your classic guy. He's not you wouldn't call him a high-level talent. He's a grinder. He's the kind of guy, it's the reason backs like him don't necessarily get drafted high, because, you're dealing with a guy that people would say there's a lot of Hassan Haskins. The kind of guy, though, that if you gave it to him 250 times, he could probably gain 1,100 yards. But he's competitive. He's disciplined. He's physically tough. He's a sustainer. He follows his path. The word a lot of, draft guys use, they say he's not creative. But he's got an excellent feel for the pace and tempo of specific runs. He's patient. He has vision. He'll finish. There's just not a lot of juice to him. So he's not going to give you much in terms of explosive runs.
Interesting. Chig Okonkwo, the tight end from Maryland, the
easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going for the whole first name.
And by the way, the only guy I didn't see was Theo Jackson, so I can't speak to him.
Mm-hmm. You didn't watch a whole lot of Tennessee defensive video?
I did, but I focused on Matthew Butler and Alontae Taylor. But I did.
And you loved Matthew Butler, I remember.
And I love Alontae Taylor, too.
Yeah. So Okonkwo, the tight end from Maryland, I guess the one thing that stuck out to me was maybe the fastest guy in the draft class at the position.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there was a lot to unlock and unleash as you think about him in the NFL. He's smooth, he's fluid, he's got really good movement traits. He can work all three levels of the defense, which, by the way, he wasn't asked to do very much at Maryland. He has the route and play speed to be a vertical seam stretcher. I kind of liked what he potentially could give you once he gets used to playing in the NFL. I think there's so much more to get out of him as a fully dimensional receiver than what we saw at Maryland. And he worked at blocking. I mean, that's the thing. You could tell that he took run blocking seriously and competed every snap. That's what you want to see. You can teach guys run blocking technique, but you want to see guys that actually take it seriously.
You got a guy right here, Kyle Phillips, who led his team in receiving. Now, we talk about short arms with Roger. Same thing with him?
You're talking
Kyle
about
Phillips.
Tight end? Oh, Kyle Phillips. I love Kyle Phillips. Kyle Phillips, to me, I'm not going to compare him to Cooper Kupp, okay? So I don't want people to think, oh,
you're the second.
Coach Mack did.
Yeah.
He's Cooper Kupp.
Yeah.
But he is Cooper Kupp in the sense that I think he could roll out of bed tomorrow and line up in the slot in the NFL. Don't forget, Cooper Kupp is a rookie. He caught 46 balls, something like that. It's easy to say Cooper Kupp now had the best year, ever for a wide receiver. I said the same thing about Cooper Kupp when he came out of Eastern Washington. I think Kyle Phillips could line up tomorrow in the slot and be really, really effective. He has the look of a professional slot receiver. He's advanced and refined in the details of route running. He's got higher level traits as a slot receiver. So Coach Mack said that too, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah, I mean, great minds think alike. What can I tell you?
I love it. Hey, thanks for the rundown there, Greg. Good to chat with you. Have a great weekend.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, that Mccreary stuff at the end was really fun. By the way, I didn't really do a lot of hunting in Queens and New York, by the way.
You didn't know pit bulls and knives?
Hey,
No.
I did see an article, though, Cosell. What was it, in London or something, that there's wild boars running around? So you
That's
just
true.
never know.
Italy.
Italy. Mm-hmm. Okay. Head on a swivel, Cosell. You never know.
Wow. Yeah, well, in Queens and New York, there was not a lot of space. We didn't really do any hunting there,
Yeah, I can understand that.
At Greg Cosell on Twitter. Thank you, Greg.